Welcome to Play. It's not a waste of time. And in that spirit, I thought we'd kick off with a game. For those of you who are a little skeptical, I want to assure you that it will be both painless and brief. But the game is called Stand Up, and the way it's going to work is I'm going to make a series of statements, and if that statement is true for you, you're going to rise up, pause for a second, look around, and then sit back down. And if standing up's not working for you, you can go ahead and make an upward sweeping gesture with your arms to signify your engagement. And for those of you watching in DC, I realize it's going to feel a little dorky, but I really want you to play as well, so go for it. Okay, if you are a parent, stand up. All right, sit back down. If you have exercised already today, stand up. Oh, wow. All right, sit back down. If you are a doctor, stand up. Okay, see, and if you're a PhD, we're going to go fully inclusive. PhDs, y'all stand up too. There we go, waving upward. Excellent, sit back down. If you've ever been to a dead show, stand up. Wow. I'm wondering how this compares to DC, but that's good. If you've ever been in a musical, stand up. Wow. All right, sit back down. If you have ever had a journal article published, stand up. Wow. All right, sit back down. If you speak 2 or more languages, stand up. Wow. All right, sit back down. If you subscribe to The New Yorker, stand up. All right, sit back down. If at any point during the summer you found yourself singing along or nodding along to Pharrell's song, Happy, stand up. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sit back down. Thank you for playing, not painful. So while it's fresh in your mind, I want you to consider a few things about that experience. The first is, I want you to think about how, while I was saying the words and we were playing the game, how you experienced what I was saying. I want you to think about if there was a mild cognitive shift, that the way you were listening, that you were just slightly more engaged because potentially you were going to be an actor in what I was saying. Second thing I want you to consider is how you experienced the rest of the audience. Now, usually when someone's just standing up in front of an audience being didactic, it's kind of a two-way street, but just between you and me. But while we were playing, did you notice the audience more? Did you maybe check out the other person was having that awkward, okay, I'm a PhD, does that count as claiming a doctor moment? Did you think, oh, good, they saw that I had a journal article published, a little bit of welling of pride, and let's be honest about this crowd. Did you have a moment when you thought, I've stood twice, and that woman next to me has stood every single time? The third thing I want you to consider about the experience is just the physical. Like, we've just come back from lunch, but you were standing up and down, so you were more in your body that way. And there might have been a slight, nothing over the top, but a slight physiological response to the different emotional things, the feeling connected or the feeling pride or envy or whatever it was. But you're in your body in a different way when you were playing. So was that playing? Does that count? I would say yes, too. But I would also say that in this one way, play's a little like pornography in that you know it when you see it. It's hard to define. It's a little elusive. The definition in the dictionary is useful. In the dictionary, it says that play is a pleasurable activity undertaken for no apparent purpose. And I would throw in volition. I actually think that choosing to do it is an important part of it being play. One of my favorite explanations of a game is by the philosopher Bernard Suits, and he wrote that a game is the voluntary attempt to overcome an unnecessary challenge. So while we don't necessarily have a one set definition of play, we do know a lot about play. We know that individuals who play frequently are more likely to have a really good sense of trust. We know that they have a greater facility when it comes to self-regulation or to conflict resolution. And then, not surprisingly, given these attributes for individuals, we know that groups that play frequently also tend to be healthier. It's true for families, it's true for workplaces. For grown-ups, when you're measuring it, what you're looking at is physical and emotional well-being, social capital. In my work out in schools all across the country, we've also done a lot of work measuring it with kids in schools. We partnered with Stanford University and Mathematica Policy Research, and researchers from there did a randomized control trial. They looked at 29 schools across the country, 17 that had this very thoughtful play program brought in, and then 12 that didn't have any change. And they found some really interesting, deep impact. The first thing they found was that kids at the school where play was thoughtfully brought in, that they felt safer, not just when they were playing, but throughout the school day. Second thing they found is that teachers were recovering instructional time. That kids were coming back to class and they were more cooperative, they had gotten to run around, they were ready to learn. Third thing they found was that we increased vigorous physical activity when play was thoughtfully brought into the school day. And a room full of physicians, I don't need to tell you that there are few things that are as unqualified and good as increasing vigorous physical activity. And the final thing they found, and I think this is the most surprising, the most interesting, was that teachers at the schools where play was brought in more thoughtfully rated bullying 43% lower than at the schools where there was no change. Now, what's striking about that, right, is that there was no mention of bullying in the program. There was no targeting kids who'd been bullied or who'd been engaging in bullying activities. It was just a school-wide intervention where play was brought in, and that you could have that kind of an impact, one of the biggest statistically significant impacts on reducing bullying ever documented in ICT, going toe-to-toe against programs that were purely bullying-focused is pretty extraordinary. So the crazy thing is that we know that play is beneficial for individuals, we know that it's great for groups, and yet we have, as a society, a certain amount of ambivalence about it. I mean, the very title of this session, Play is Not a Waste of Time, hints pretty broadly at that. We also have seen that there's been a decline in time spent playing. Over the past decades, kids' playtime has decreased, and it's disproportionately affected kids from low-income families. And it's also decreased for grown-ups. Ever since we've been keeping stats on how many hours worked, we work more hours now than we ever have, crowding out the adult equivalents of playtime. But we were built to play. Play is pleasurable, and because of that, it can lead us into these opportunities for learning and growth. Play is the missing piece of human, social, and emotional development that gives us the skills that we need to become engaged citizens. And so our collective well-being, I would go so far as to say, our democracy, or the possibility that our democracy will realize its full potential, is dependent upon opportunities to play being allowed and encouraged to flourish equitably. If you all consider those defining moments in your own lives, those times, those experiences that helped you really become who you are now, that really helped you find out what it was that made you you and how you were going to contribute, I would wager that a number of us in this room discovered those things while we were engaged in an activity that was without apparent purpose. That if I was to travel back in time and talk to the people who loved you in those moments, that they might even somewhat disparagingly have said that you were engaged in those times in voluntary attempts to overcome unnecessary challenges. And you can protest, you can say, no, I was working then, I wasn't playing. But that's a false choice. I think Brian Sutton Smith got it absolutely right when he said, the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. There's a young woman I work with whose name is Caitlin, and she's based at a school in the Northeast. And she wrote to me this spring about a young man at her school named Adonis. And Adonis is in 4th grade. He's 9 years old. And Caitlin described how when she arrived at the school in the fall, a number of the teachers kind of gave her a heads up that Adonis was difficult. He could be challenging and disruptive, disrespectful. So, Caitlin checked him out and was aware of him, but she didn't have a lot of interaction with him during the school day until this spring. And this spring, Adonis comes up to Caitlin and he says, I want to be on your volleyball team. So Caitlin says, okay, takes him onto the volleyball team. He starts showing up for practice, and as advertised, he's difficult. He's a little disruptive. And nothing changes overnight, but incrementally over the course of the season, Adonis starts getting a little bit better. He's just, fewer of the negative behaviors, a little more positivity, and Caitlin's starting to think, maybe I'll consider bringing him on as one of my junior coaches. It's a leadership thing she has going on at the school where kids help out at recess. They turn the rope for the younger kids. They encourage kids to use rock, paper, scissors if there's a disagreement about if it's in or out. So she's just thinking that. And then it's like the 6th week of a 7-week season. And the game that week, Adonis just has this breakthrough evening. He's super positive. He's giving high fives to his teammates, and he's just great. And he goes on this serving jag where he scores 7 points in a row. And Caitlin described him as beaming. He was just so happy and good and in himself. The next week, the final week of the season, the wheels come off the cart. Adonis is so disruptive and disrespectful, and he's openly rude to Caitlin, and he gets in a fight. They're giving out certificates of participation after the final game, and he gets so worked up, he storms off. So that night, Caitlin's home, and she's bummed. She's trying to figure out what she's going to do. She'd been thinking she was going to make him a junior coach, and in fact, the plan is to announce the next cohort of junior coaches the next day. She doesn't know what to do at all, and so she's going back and forth, and then she has this moment of deep empathy, and she thinks, maybe Adonis was just breaking up with volleyball before it broke up with him. Very human thing to do. And she thought about things she'd heard me say about how our job is to see the best in every kid and then to help them see it themselves. And so almost against her better judgment, Caitlin puts Adonis on the list for junior coaches. So the next day, they're in the hallway, and she has this bulletin board, and she posts the list up, and all the other kids come, pouring up to see who's on, who's a junior coach for the final cohort. Everybody except Adonis, because Adonis has controlled that situation. He knows he's not on that list, right? So he doesn't look, and finally the other kids are sort of filing away. Some are elated, some are disappointed. And Adonis, at this point, walks up to the list, and he looks, and Caitlin said you could see the shock roll through his body. He was so surprised to see his name on the list. So he comes up to Caitlin, and he looks kind of freaked out, and he says, "Coach K, can we talk outside?" She's like, "Okay." They step outside, and at this point, the overwhelm is visible, and he's got his hands in his pocket, and he's shifting from side to side. And he says, "Well, I just want to thank you for letting me be on the volleyball team." And Caitlin smiles at him, and she says, "Adonis, it was a pleasure to have you on my team." And at this, Caitlin described him as just almost freezing, and his eyes welled up, and he responded with a question. He said, "It was?" And Caitlin said in that moment that she knew that no matter what happened, she had done the right thing, putting him on the junior coach list, that no 9-year-old should ever wonder if it was a pleasure to have him on your team. It's so easy to dismiss play as trivial and unimportant, but nothing could be farther from the truth. Play matters. Play matters because it gives us a brief respite from the tyranny of apparent purpose. Play matters because it compels us to choose, to put a stake in the ground and say, "I care." And in doing that, we better come to know ourselves. Play matters because people matter, and it reminds us of our interdependence, and it gives us a chance to really see other people, and in turn, to be really and truly seen. Thank you very much.